The champagne bubbles rose through crystal flutes like tiny diamonds, catching the light of 1,000 twinkling Christmas decorations. Victoria Hayes stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her emerald green dress shimmering under the chandeliers. But the sparkle in her eyes had nothing to do with the festive atmosphere. Her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her small evening purse, fingers pressed against the thin stack of papers hidden inside. Papers that would end her 3-year marriage to Marcus Thornton. She watched him from across the room, his tall frame commanding attention as always. Marcus stood surrounded by business associates and admirers, his smile practiced and perfect, the same smile that had once made her heart race. Now it only made her chest tighten with an ache she couldn't quite name. He wore a tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair swept back in that effortlessly elegant way he'd perfected. He looked like he belonged here, among the wealthy elite of Manhattan, in this Fifth Avenue penthouse decorated for the annual Thornton Industries Christmas Gala. Victoria didn't belong. She never had, really, though she'd tried desperately for 3 years to fit into this world of private jets and charity galas. She'd been a kindergarten teacher when they met, volunteering at a children's hospital fundraiser. He'd told her that her kindness and authenticity had captivated him, that she was different from everyone else in his world. She'd believed him then. "Mrs. Thornton, you look absolutely stunning tonight," cooed Melissa Bradford, one of the society wives who'd never quite accepted Victoria into their exclusive circle. "Though you do look a bit pale, dear." "Are you feeling well?" Victoria forced a smile, her free hand instinctively moving to her stomach before she caught herself. "Just a bit tired, thank you for asking." The truth was, she felt shattered. The nausea that had plagued her for the past 2 weeks wasn't just from stress, though discovering your husband's infidelity certainly qualified as stressful. 3 days ago, she'd sat in Dr. Morrison's office, staring at the ultrasound screen, seeing the tiny flutter of a heartbeat that changed everything. 8 weeks pregnant. She was carrying Marcus's child, and he had no idea. She'd found the text messages 2 weeks ago, accidentally, when his phone had buzzed during dinner. One of the rare evenings he'd actually been home. The preview on the screen had been enough. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was incredible, eh?" She'd tried to tell herself it was nothing, but curiosity and growing suspicion had driven her to look through his phone later that night while he showered. What she'd found had broken something fundamental inside her. Amanda Pierce, Marcus's executive assistant, young, beautiful, ambitious. The affair had been going on for 6 months. Hotel reservations, secret meetings during business trips, intimate photographs. The most painful part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was reading how Marcus described their marriage to Amanda. A mistake. Something I got into too young. She doesn't understand my world. Victoria had cried for 2 days straight, barely able to function. She'd called in sick to the elementary school where she'd recently started volunteering again. She'd considered confronting Marcus immediately, but something had held her back. Maybe it was the tiny voice in her head that wondered if she'd misunderstood, if there was some explanation. Then came the pregnancy test, then the doctor's appointment, then the impossible decision she now faced. "Darling, there you are." Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts as he appeared beside her, his hand settling on the small of her back with practiced ease. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. "I've been looking everywhere for you. The Hendersons want to meet you. Major potential investors." Victoria looked up at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign of the man she'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. His blue eyes met hers briefly before sliding away, already scanning the room for the next important person to network with. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not now, Victoria. This is important." His tone was dismissive. "Can it wait until after the party?" Something crystallized inside her in that moment. The waiting was over. She'd spent 3 years waiting, waiting for him to have time for her, waiting for him to prioritize their marriage, waiting for him to become the partner he'd promised to be. "No," she said, her voice firmer now. "It can't wait." Marcus's jaw tightened, irritation crossing his features. "Victoria, please, not here. Not tonight. This party is crucial for the company, and I need you to—" "You need me to what? Smile and play the perfect wife?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and she saw nearby guests glance their way with thinly veiled curiosity. His hand tightened on her back, fingers pressing into her spine. "Let's not make a scene. We'll discuss whatever is bothering you tomorrow." Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Victoria pulled away from his touch, reaching into her purse with fingers that had stopped trembling. Actually, I need you to sign these. Tonight. Marcus frowned, his attention finally fully on her as she withdrew the envelope. What are you talking about? What papers? Divorce papers. The words hung in the air between them, crystallizing into something real and irreversible. Around them the party continued, laughter and music and the tinkling of glasses, but in their small bubble of space, time seemed to stop. His face went through a rapid succession of emotions, confusion, disbelief, then anger. Have you lost your mind? Put those away, we are not doing this here. I know about Amanda. Victoria's voice cracked on the name, despite her best efforts to remain composed. She felt the tears building behind her eyes, hot and insistent. I know everything, Marcus. The hotels, the lies, all of it. For just a moment she saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold defensiveness. I don't know what you think you know, but this is neither the time nor the place. There will never be a right time for you, Victoria interrupted, her voice rising slightly. There's never a right time to talk about our marriage, about us, about anything that matters. You're always too busy, always have something more important to deal with. I built this company from nothing, Marcus hissed, his voice tight with barely contained anger. Everything I've done for us, for our future. What future? The tears were falling now, hot streaks down her cheeks that she didn't bother to wipe away. We don't have a future, Marcus. We barely have a present. When was the last time we had dinner together? A real conversation. When did you last look at me and actually see me? His silence was answer enough. Victoria thrust the papers toward him, her hand shaking. Please, just sign them. Let's end this with whatever dignity we have left. Marcus stared at the envelope, his face pale. Around them, more people were definitely watching now, whispers spreading through the crowd. Victoria could see Amanda Pierce across the room, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp and calculating. Victoria, don't do this, Marcus said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Not like this. Whatever problems we have, we can work through them. But please, not here, not in front of everyone. She almost wavered. Old habits of caring what he wanted, of putting his needs first, almost made her back down. But then she thought of those text messages, of all the lonely nights waiting for a husband who never came home. She thought of the tiny heartbeat she'd seen on that ultrasound screen. I'm done protecting your image, she whispered back, pressing the papers into his chest. Sign them, Marcus, please. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Maybe he finally saw her, really saw her, for the first time in months. Or maybe he just saw that she was serious, that there would be no talking her out of this. With movements that seemed to take enormous effort, Marcus took the papers from her hands. He pulled a pen from his inside jacket pocket and, without reading a single word, signed his name with swift, angry strokes across the designated lines. There, he said coldly, shoving the papers back at her. Happy now? Victoria took the papers with shaking hands, clutching them to her chest. She wasn't happy. She was devastated. But she was also, for the first time in months, free. Goodbye, Marcus, she whispered. She turned and walked toward the exit, her vision blurred with tears, her heart pounding. Behind her, she heard the murmur of shocked voices. She didn't care anymore. Let them talk, let them judge. As she reached the grand double doors, she paused and looked back one last time. Marcus stood frozen where she'd left him, the signed papers still in his hand, his face unreadable. Amanda Pierce was already moving toward him. Victoria pushed through the doors and into the December night, the cold air hitting her face. She pressed her hand to her stomach, to the secret growing there that Marcus would never know about. At least, that's what she thought as she disappeared into the New York City night, unaware that fate had very different plans and that in exactly 6 days, a chance encounter would change everything once again. 6 days after the Christmas party, Victoria sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, a small Irish cafe tucked away in Brooklyn, far from the glittering world of Manhattan's elite. The checkered tablecloth was worn but clean, the coffee strong and bitter, exactly what she needed. She'd chosen this place deliberately, somewhere Marcus would never set foot, somewhere she could think without running into anyone from his social circle. Her hand wrapped around the warm ceramic mug as she stared at the stack of documents spread before her. Bank statements, apartment listings, job applications. The practical realities of her new life were overwhelming. The prenuptial agreement Marcus had insisted on 3 years ago meant she'd walk away with almost nothing. Just a modest settlement that would cover maybe 6 months of living expenses if she was careful. After that, she was on her own, with a baby on the way. The thought still felt surreal, even though she'd taken 3 more pregnancy tests just to be sure. Each one had shown the same result. She was going to be a mother, and she had no idea how she was going to manage. Her teaching credential had lapsed when she'd married Marcus and stopped working at his insistence. "Mrs. Marcus Thornton doesn't need to work," he'd said, making it sound like a gift rather than the isolation it had become. "More coffee, honey." The waitress, a woman in her 60s named Diane, whose name tag was slightly crooked, appeared with a pot. "Actually, just water, please," Victoria said, managing a small smile. She'd been reading about pregnancy. No caffeine, no alcohol, no soft cheeses. A whole list of restrictions for a life she hadn't planned. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been sitting here for 2 hours now." Diane's voice was kind, genuinely concerned in a way that made Victoria's eyes sting with unexpected tears. "Just going through some changes," Victoria managed. Diane patted her shoulder gently. "Changes can be good. Scary, but good." She walked away, leaving Victoria to her paperwork and spiraling thoughts. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Victoria glanced up automatically. A man entered, shaking snow from his dark coat. He was tall, probably in his late 30s, with slightly disheveled brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore jeans and a sweater under his coat, casual, unpretentious. He looked tired, like someone who'd been working long hours. But there was something warm about his expression as he smiled at Diane. "The usual, Dr. Bennett?" Diane called out. "Please, Diane, and tell me you saved me a slice of that apple pie." "For you, always." Dr. Bennett slid into a booth near the window, pulling out a worn leather journal and a pen. Victoria watched him for a moment, curious despite herself. There was something peaceful about him, something that stood in stark contrast to the high-strung energy of Marcus's world. He began writing, his brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally pausing to look out the window at the snow beginning to fall more heavily. Victoria turned back to her own papers, but her concentration was broken. She found herself thinking about the baby again, about doctor's appointments and prenatal care. She'd need to find a new obstetrician, someone who didn't know Marcus, didn't run in those circles. Dr. Morrison had been recommended by Melissa Bradford, which meant the entire society circuit would know about her pregnancy within days if she continued seeing her. "Excuse me," a voice said, and Victoria looked up to find Dr. Bennett standing beside her booth, holding a napkin. "I'm sorry to bother you, but you dropped this." Victoria glanced down and realized one of her apartment listings had fallen to the floor. "Oh, thank you," she said, taking the napkin and the paper he'd picked up. Their eyes met, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, but not the kind she expected. "I'm sorry, but are you all right? You look like you could use a friend." The directness of the question caught her off guard. In Marcus's world, no one ever said what they actually meant. Everything was subtext and social maneuvering. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then found herself adding, "Actually, no, I'm not fine at all." Dr. Bennett hesitated, then gestured to the seat across from her. "May I?" "I'm a good listener." Occupational hazard. Something about his gentle manner, his genuine concern, made Victoria nod. He slid into the booth, and she found herself telling him everything, or almost everything. She told him about the divorce, about feeling lost and alone, about trying to figure out how to rebuild her life. She didn't mention the pregnancy. That secret still felt too raw, too vulnerable to share with a stranger. "I'm Andrew, by the way," he said when she paused. "Andrew Bennett. I'm a pediatrician at Brooklyn Children's Hospital." "Victoria," she replied, leaving off her last name. For now, she just wanted to be Victoria, not Mrs. Thornton, not Marcus's soon-to-be ex-wife. "Well, Victoria, for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Walking away from something that isn't working takes more courage than most people have." They talked for over an hour. Andrew told her about his work at the hospital, about the kids he treated, the families he helped. He'd grown up in Boston, the son of 2 teachers, and had always known he wanted to work with children. He was passionate about his work in a way that reminded Victoria of her own teaching days before she'd given it all up. "I used to teach kindergarten," she found herself saying. "I loved it. The kids, their energy, their curiosity about everything." "Why did you stop?" Victoria's smile faded. "My ex-husband thought it wasn't appropriate for his image. A billionaire's wife should be on charity boards, not teaching 5-year-olds their ABCs. Andrew's expression darkened slightly. "That's Marcus Thornton, isn't it? I saw the news about the party, about the divorce." Victoria's stomach dropped. Of course he'd seen it. The gossip sites had been full of it for days. Photos of her crying, of Marcus's angry face, speculation about what had caused the dramatic public split. She started to gather her papers, suddenly wanting to leave. "Wait," Andrew said gently. "I'm not judging you. Actually, I think what you did took incredible strength. Standing up for yourself like that in front of all those people. You don't know anything about it," Victoria said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to walk away from expectations. My parents wanted me to take over their private practice in Boston. Comfortable, wealthy patients, predictable hours. Instead, I came here to work with kids who don't have insurance, whose families can barely afford care. My father still doesn't speak to me." Victoria studied him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because sometimes it helps to know you're not alone, that other people have made hard choices too." Diane appeared with Andrew's pie and fresh water for Victoria. "You two look like you're solving all the world's problems over here." "Just sharing war stories," Andrew said with a smile. After Diane left, Victoria found herself relaxing again. They talked about books, about the city, about small things that had nothing to do with wealth or status or social climbing. It was the first real conversation she'd had in months, maybe years. Andrew made her laugh, something she'd almost forgotten how to do. "I should go," Victoria said finally, glancing at her phone. It was nearly 7 o'clock, and the snow outside had become a full storm. "I need to find a hotel for the night." "A hotel? Don't you have a place?" Victoria shook her head. "I left the penthouse the night of the party. I've been staying with a friend, but she's out of town for the holidays. I was apartment hunting today, but nothing's available until after New Year's." Andrew frowned, clearly troubled. "In this storm, everything's going to be booked because of the holiday travel chaos." He paused, then seemed to make a decision. "Look, I know we just met, and this might sound crazy, but I have a guest room. It's small, but it's warm and safe. You're welcome to stay until you find something." Victoria stared at him, shocked. "I couldn't possibly—" "Please, I'd feel terrible knowing you were trying to find somewhere in this weather. No strings attached, I promise. Just one person helping another." Every instinct told Victoria to refuse. She barely knew this man, but something in his eyes, in his genuine kindness, made her pause. And the truth was, she was exhausted and scared, and the thought of wandering through a snowstorm looking for a hotel room made her want to cry. "Just for tonight," she heard herself say. "I'll find something tomorrow." "Fair enough." Andrew smiled, and Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. Not attraction exactly, but something warm and hopeful. Maybe kindness still existed in the world. Maybe she would be okay after all. As they stood to leave, Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. There's something about Amanda you need to know. Melissa Bradford." Victoria stared at the message, her heart racing. What could Melissa possibly know? And why was she reaching out now, after years of barely concealed disdain? She looked up at Andrew, who was pulling on his coat, oblivious to the message that had just complicated everything once again. Whatever Melissa knew, it would have to wait. Right now, Victoria just needed to get through one more night, one more step forward into her uncertain future. Andrew's apartment was a modest 2-bedroom in a renovated brownstone, worlds away from the penthouse Victoria had shared with Marcus. Books lined every wall, medical journals stacked on the coffee table alongside novels and poetry collections. The furniture was comfortable but worn, the kind that invited you to curl up and stay a while. It felt like a home, not a showpiece. "The guest room is through here," Andrew said, leading her down a short hallway. "Bathroom is right next door. There are fresh towels in the closet. Make yourself comfortable." The room was small but cozy, with a double bed covered in a blue quilt, a wooden dresser, and a window overlooking the snow-covered street below. It was perfect. "Thank you," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "Really." You have no idea what this means. Andrew smiled gently. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning if you'd like, or not, whatever you need. After he left, Victoria sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone. Melissa's message still glowed on the screen, demanding attention. With trembling fingers, she typed back, "What do you know?" The response came almost immediately. "Not over text. Can you meet tomorrow? It's important, Victoria. About the baby." Victoria's blood ran cold. About the baby? How could Melissa possibly know about the pregnancy? She hadn't told anyone except Dr. Morrison, and doctor-patient confidentiality should have protected that information. Unless her phone rang, Melissa's name flashing across the screen. Victoria answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know?" "Dr. Morrison's nurse is my cousin," Melissa said without preamble. "She saw your chart." "Victoria, I know we've never been close, but you need to hear what I have to say. Amanda Pierce isn't who you think she is. I know exactly who she is. She's my ex-husband's mistress. It's more complicated than that. Meet me tomorrow at Café Lalo, noon. Please, this affects your baby's future." Before Victoria could respond, Melissa hung up. Victoria stared at the phone, her mind racing. What could possibly be more complicated than Marcus having an affair? And why would Melissa, of all people, suddenly care about helping her? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Victoria lay in the unfamiliar bed, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, thinking about everything that had changed in such a short time. A week ago, she'd been Mrs. Marcus Thornton, living a life of luxury and loneliness. Now she was a pregnant woman sleeping in a stranger's guest room, her marriage over, her future uncertain. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and found Andrew in the kitchen, making breakfast. "I made decaf," he said, noticing her hesitation. "And scrambled eggs if you're hungry." Victoria froze. "How did you know about the baby?" Andrew smiled kindly. "You ordered water at the diner, avoided coffee, and you've been unconsciously touching your stomach all evening. I'm a pediatrician. I notice these things. Don't worry, your secret is safe with me." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes. "Does everyone know?" "I doubt it. Most people aren't looking for the signs. Congratulations, by the way. How far along are you?" 8 weeks. Victoria sank into a chair at the small kitchen table. "Marcus doesn't know. I don't think I'm going to tell him." Andrew set a plate of eggs in front of her, his expression neutral. "That's your choice to make. But can I ask why?" "Because he made it very clear what he thinks of our marriage, of me. Why would I want to tie myself to him for the rest of my life through a child? Why would I want my baby to grow up watching their father choose work and his mistress over family?" "Fair points," Andrew said quietly. "But kids have a way of changing people. My father was a workaholic until I was born. My mother says I saved their marriage." "Or so," Victoria countered. "The baby becomes just another obligation he resents, another thing keeping him trapped in a life he didn't want." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Victoria glanced at the clock. "I have a meeting at noon. Someone who says she has information about Amanda." "The woman Marcus was involved with?" "Yes, Melissa Bradford. She's part of Marcus's social circle. We've never been friends, but she reached out last night. Said it was important." Andrew frowned. "Be careful. People in that world don't usually do anything without an agenda." "I know, but I have to hear what she has to say." At noon, Victoria sat in a corner booth at Café Lalo, watching snow fall past the windows. Melissa arrived 15 minutes late, wrapped in a fur coat that probably cost more than a used car, her perfectly styled blonde hair dusted with snowflakes. "Thank you for coming," Melissa said, sliding into the booth. She looked nervous, which was unusual for a woman who normally exuded confidence. "I wasn't sure you would. You said this was about my baby," Victoria said flatly. "So talk." Melissa ordered a cappuccino before turning to face Victoria directly. "Amanda Pierce isn't just having an affair with Marcus. She's been systematically planning to take over his company." Victoria blinked. "What?" "She's been collecting evidence of financial irregularities for months. Small things Marcus has done that aren't quite legal, creative accounting, some questionable offshore transactions. Nothing major, but enough to cause serious problems if it came out. She's been documenting everything." "Why would she do that?" "If she's in a relationship with him, because she's not really in love with him, Victoria. She's ambitious. She wants Thornton Industries, and Marcus was her way in. My husband does business with Marcus, and he overheard Amanda on the phone 2 days ago talking to some investor about a takeover plan. She's going to use the evidence she's gathered to force Marcus out of his own company. Victoria's head spun. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Melissa's expression softened in a way Victoria had never seen before. Because despite what you might think, I'm not a terrible person. When I heard you were pregnant, and yes, I know that information came to me unethically, I realized something. That baby is going to be Marcus's heir. If Amanda succeeds in taking over the company, your child loses their inheritance. Everything Marcus built would go to her. I don't care about Marcus's money, Victoria said. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Not for herself, but for the baby. Every child deserved security, opportunity, a future. Maybe you don't, but your child might someday. And there's more. Melissa leaned forward, her voice dropping. Amanda isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Amanda Hartley. She worked for Grayson Corp 3 years ago. Marcus's biggest competitor. She was fired for corporate espionage. She's been playing Marcus from the beginning. Victoria felt like the world was tilting on its axis. Does Marcus know any of this? I don't think so. He's so wrapped up in her, so convinced she loves him. You know how he gets when he's focused on something. He doesn't see anything else. That was true. Marcus's single-minded focus was both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. When he wanted something, he pursued it relentlessly, blind to warning signs and red flags. Why don't you tell him yourself? Victoria asked. Because he won't believe me. He'll think I'm stirring up trouble or jealous or making things up. But you're different. You were his wife. Despite everything, I think part of him still listens to you. Victoria laughed bitterly. He stopped listening to me a long time ago, Melissa. Maybe. But this isn't about your marriage anymore. This is about protecting your child's future, and whether you like it or not, that child's future is tied to Marcus and what happens to his company. Victoria sat back, her mind racing. She'd walked away from Marcus and his world. She'd signed the divorce papers, burned that bridge. The thought of going back, of having to talk to him again, made her stomach churn. But Melissa was right about one thing. This wasn't just about her anymore. I need proof, Victoria said finally. If I'm going to go to Marcus with this, I need more than rumors and overhead conversations. Melissa reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a flash drive. My husband made copies of some documents he found. Financial records, emails between Amanda and Grayson Corp executives. It's all here. Victoria took the flash drive, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to contain so much potential destruction. If I do this, I'm doing it for my baby, not for Marcus. He made his choices. He has to live with them. Fair enough, Melissa said. But Victoria, be careful. Amanda is dangerous. She's not going to give up easily, and if she realizes you know about her plans, she'll what? I'm already divorced from Marcus. I have nothing she wants. You have his baby, Melissa said quietly, and that makes you a threat she might not be willing to ignore. Victoria left the cafe an hour later, the flash drive burning a hole in her coat pocket. She walked through the snowy streets of Manhattan, her mind churning with everything Melissa had told her. She should go straight to Marcus, show him the evidence, warn him about Amanda's true intentions. But the thought of seeing him again, of opening that door even a crack, filled her with dread. Her phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. How did the meeting go? Are you okay? Something about his simple concern made her eyes sting with tears. She typed back, Can we talk? I need advice. Of course, I'm home. Come whenever you're ready. But as Victoria turned to head back to Brooklyn, she saw something that stopped her cold. Across the street, standing in the falling snow, was Amanda Pierce. And she was staring directly at Victoria, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp and calculating, their gazes locked for a long moment. Then Amanda smiled, a cold, predatory smile that sent chills down Victoria's spine, and disappeared into the crowd. Victoria's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, protective and afraid. Melissa's warning echoed in her mind. Amanda is dangerous. And now Amanda knew that Victoria knew something. The question was, what would she do about it? Victoria practically ran back to Andrew's apartment, her heart pounding, constantly checking over her shoulder. Amanda's cold smile haunted her thoughts. By the time she reached the brownstone, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the key Andrew had given her that morning. "Victoria?" Andrew appeared in the hallway, concern flooding his face when he saw her pale expression. What happened? She told him everything. About Melissa's revelations, the flash drive, and most unsettling of all, Amanda seeing her outside the cafe. Andrew listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled as she spoke. "You need to go to Marcus," he said finally. "Tonight. If Amanda knows you have information, she might accelerate whatever she's planning." "I can't," Victoria whispered. "I can't face him, Andrew, not after everything. This isn't about you and Marcus anymore. This is about protecting your child's future. And like it or not, that child deserves a father who isn't being manipulated and destroyed by someone with ulterior motives." Victoria knew he was right. She plugged the flash drive into Andrew's laptop, and they spent the next hour reviewing the documents. The evidence was damning. Emails between Amanda and Grayson Corp executives discussing weaknesses in Thornton Industries. Financial records showing how Amanda had been positioning herself to exploit loopholes in company policy, even a contract draft that would transfer controlling interest of the company to a shell corporation Amanda controlled. "She's been planning this for years," Andrew said, scrolling through the files. "This is sophisticated corporate espionage." Victoria's phone rang. Marcus's name flashed across the screen. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but Andrew gently touched her arm. "Answer it." "What do you want, Marcus?" Victoria said, her voice colder than she intended. "Victoria, we need to talk. Something's happened with Amanda. His voice broke, and Victoria heard something she'd rarely heard from him. Fear. She's threatened to go public with information that could destroy the company. She wants me to sign over 40% of my shares, or she'll release everything to the press and the Securities Exchange Commission. I don't know what to do." Despite everything, despite the hurt and betrayal, Victoria felt a pang of sympathy. "Where are you?" "At the office." "Victoria, I know I have no right to ask, but I'm coming. Don't sign anything until I get there." She hung up and looked at Andrew, who was already grabbing his coat. "I'm coming with you," he said firmly. "You're not facing this alone." The Thornton Industries building stood like a glass and steel monument to Marcus's success. Victoria hadn't been here in over a year, not since Marcus had made it clear that his work was separate from their marriage. The security guard recognized her and waved them through despite the late hour. Marcus's office was on the 45th floor, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. He stood at those windows now, his shoulders slumped in a way Victoria had never seen. He looked defeated, smaller somehow than the confident man she'd married. "Victoria." He turned, and his eyes widened when he saw Andrew. "Who's this?" "A friend," Victoria said firmly. "Someone who's helped me when I needed it, which is more than I can say for you." Marcus flinched, but didn't argue. His gaze returned to Victoria, and for the first time in months really looked at her. "You look different. Are you okay?" "No thanks to you," Victoria said, pulling the flash drive from her pocket. "But that's not why I'm here. Amanda Pierce isn't who you think she is." She told him everything Melissa had revealed, then plugged the flash drive into his computer. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions as he reviewed the documents: disbelief, anger, betrayal, and finally, a crushing realization. "She never loved me," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "It was all a lie." "Everything?" "Yes," Victoria said without sympathy. "Now you know how it feels." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes red. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. For everything. The affair, the way I treated you, how I made you feel like you didn't matter. You were the best thing in my life, and I was too blind and arrogant to see it. Your apology is 3 years too late, Marcus. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, help me figure out what to do about this. Amanda is threatening to release falsified documents along with the real ones. She'll destroy everything I've built, ruin the company, put thousands of people out of work." Andrew spoke for the first time. "You need to go to the authorities. Corporate espionage is a federal crime. With this evidence, you can stop her before she does any more damage." "But the scandal," Marcus protested. "The news that I had an affair with someone who was planning to destroy my company will be embarrassing," Andrew finished, "but survivable. What won't be survivable is letting her win." Victoria watched Marcus struggle with his pride, his image, all the things he'd always valued more than substance. Then something shifted in his expression. "You're right. Both of you. I'll call my attorney, then the authorities." As Marcus made his calls, Victoria walked to the windows, looking out at the city where her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. She felt Andrew come to stand beside her. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Did I? I could have let her destroy him. After everything he did to me, wouldn't I have been justified? Maybe. But that's not who you are, Victoria. You're better than that." Marcus finished his calls and turned to them. "My attorney is on his way. The authorities want to meet first thing in the morning." He paused, then looked directly at Victoria. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve your help, but thank you." Victoria nodded stiffly. "I didn't do it for you, Marcus. I did it because it was the right thing to do." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Victoria, wait. Can we talk? Just for a minute?" She exchanged a glance with Andrew, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll wait in the lobby," he said, giving her privacy. After Andrew left, an uncomfortable silence filled the vast office. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than Victoria had ever seen him. "I've been a fool," he said finally. "In so many ways. I threw away our marriage for someone who was using me. I made you feel small and unimportant when you were the only real thing in my life. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix what's broken, Marcus." "I know, but I need you to know that I do love you. I know I showed it in all the wrong ways or didn't show it at all, but I do. I always have." Victoria felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "Love isn't enough. It never was. You loved your company more, your image more, your ambitions more. I was always going to come in last. I can change, I will change, if you give me another chance." "No." The word was firm, final. "We're done, Marcus. The divorce stands. But..." She hesitated, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. This was the moment. She could tell him about the baby, tie herself to him forever, or she could walk away and raise her child alone. "But what?" Marcus asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Victoria made her decision. Some bridges needed to stay burned. "But I hope you learn from this. I hope you become a better person, someone who values people over profits, relationships over reputation, not for me, but for yourself." 3 months later, Victoria stood in the doorway of her new apartment in Brooklyn, a small but bright 2-bedroom that Andrew had helped her find. Her baby bump was visible now, impossible to hide. She'd gotten her teaching credential reinstated and had a job starting in the fall at a local elementary school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was hers. Andrew had become her closest friend, helping her navigate doctor's appointments, furniture shopping, and the 1,000 small anxieties of impending motherhood. He'd never pushed for more than friendship, but Victoria saw the way he looked at her sometimes, the tenderness in his eyes when he talked about the baby. Marcus had reached out twice after that night in his office. The first time to tell her that Amanda had been arrested and was facing multiple charges. The second time, a month later, to invite her to coffee. She declined both times. That chapter of her life was closed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Victoria was leaving her prenatal yoga class one Saturday morning when she quite literally bumped into someone on the sidewalk. Strong hands steadied her, and she looked up to find Marcus staring down at her, his eyes immediately dropping to her prominent baby bump. "Victoria," he breathed, You're pregnant." She could have lied, could have claimed it was someone else's baby, but looking into his eyes, she found she didn't have the energy for more deception. "Yes." Is it mine?" "Yes." Marcus stumbled backward, shock written across his face. "How long have you known?" "Since before the Christmas party, since before I asked you for the divorce." A range of emotions crossed his face. Shock, hurt, anger, and finally understanding. "That's why you looked so pale that night. Why you were so determined. You were pregnant and I was..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Having an affair," Victoria finished for him. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you staying with me out of obligation. Because I didn't want to raise a child watching their father resent them for ruining his perfect life with Amanda. Because I wanted better for my baby than a father who was there but not really present." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Our baby, Victoria. This is our baby. No, she said firmly. This is my baby. You signed away your rights when you signed those divorce papers. I didn't know. If I had known, it wouldn't have changed anything, Victoria said, but even as she spoke, she wondered if that was true. Would Marcus have fought for their marriage if he'd known about the baby? Would it have made a difference? Please, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Please don't shut me out of this. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but this is my child. Let me be a father. Let me prove that I can do better. Victoria wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to protect herself and her baby from the disappointment that would come when Marcus inevitably chose work over family again. But as she looked at him, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Genuine remorse, vulnerability, and fear of losing something precious before he'd even had a chance to hold it. I need to think, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make standing on a sidewalk. Of course, take all the time you need. But Victoria, please know that I'm not the same man I was 3 months ago. Losing you, nearly losing my company, realizing how easily I'd been manipulated. It changed me. I've been in therapy. I've stepped back from the company, promoted someone else to CEO so I could have better work-life balance. I've been trying to become the man I should have been all along. Victoria studied him, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but all she saw was sincerity. Send me your therapist's contact information. I want to talk to them. You want to verify that I'm actually in therapy? Yes. And if they confirm it, if they think you've genuinely changed, then maybe we can discuss co-parenting. Maybe. Hope bloomed across Marcus's face. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. As Victoria walked away, she felt Andrew's presence before she saw him. He'd been waiting nearby, giving her space but ready to intervene if needed. You okay? He asked gently. I don't know, Victoria admitted. He wants to be involved with the baby. How do you feel about that? Terrified? Hopeful? Confused? All of the above. She looked up at Andrew, at this man who'd shown her more kindness in 3 months than Marcus had in 3 years. Andrew, I need to ask you something. Why have you been so good to me? You barely know me, and yet you've been there for every doctor's appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of panic. Andrew's expression softened. Because from the moment I saw you in that diner, I saw someone extraordinary, someone brave and kind and real, and because... He hesitated, then continued, because I fell in love with you, Victoria. I know the timing is terrible, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that whatever you decide about Marcus, about the baby, about your future, I'll be here, as a friend or as something more if you ever feel the same way, but only when you're ready. Victoria felt her heart expand with an emotion she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate hope she'd clung to with Marcus, hoping he'd change, hoping he'd see her, but a gentle, steady hope that maybe, just maybe, real love existed. The kind that showed up, that stayed, that chose her every single day. I can't make you any promises right now, she said softly. My life is complicated, and I need to figure out what's best for my baby. I know, Andrew said, taking her hand gently, and I'll wait, however long it takes. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the nursery of her apartment, holding her daughter, a beautiful baby girl with dark hair and blue eyes like her father's. Marcus stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as he held his daughter for the first time. She's perfect, he whispered. What's her name? Claire, Victoria said. Claire Hope Bennett Thornton. Marcus looked up sharply. Bennett? Victoria glanced toward the living room where Andrew sat, giving them privacy but near enough to be part of the moment. Andrew proposed last month. I said yes. She watched Marcus absorb this information, saw the flash of pain in his eyes but also something else, acceptance, maybe even approval. He's a good man, Marcus said finally. Better than I was. He'll be a good father to Claire. He will be, Victoria agreed. But she'll need her biological father too, if you're serious about being part of her life. I am, Marcus said fervently. I promise you, Victoria, I will never let her doubt how much she's loved. I may have failed you as a husband, but I won't fail her as a father. And somehow, looking at the man who'd broken her heart holding their daughter with such tenderness, Victoria believed him. People could change. Lives could be rebuilt. And sometimes, the end of one story was just the beginning of something better. Andrew appeared in the doorway and Victoria smiled at him. Her fiancé, her partner, the man who'd shown her what real love looked like. He crossed the room and wrapped his arm around her waist, looking down at baby Claire with pure adoration. "She's amazing," he said softly. "She is," Victoria agreed, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. Her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. It was messier, more complicated, but also infinitely more real than the glossy perfection she'd tried to maintain with Marcus. She had her daughter, a man who truly loved her, a career she was passionate about, and even a tentative co-parenting relationship with Marcus that might, in time, become genuine friendship. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something better. It was real, honest, and full of hope for the future. As Claire made a small sound, both men leaned in protectively, and Victoria laughed softly. Her daughter would never doubt that she was loved, and neither would Victoria ever again. Outside, snow began to fall over Brooklyn, soft and gentle, covering everything in fresh white powder. A new beginning, Victoria thought, for all of them. And this time, she was ready for whatever came next.